Thobela Thobela Lesedi Khanya Ndauwe Shewe Share. Welcome back to our YouTube channel. I'm Gogo Khanyakude Mabuza Shengu Shabalala Lophanango Lwagwadla Veda Munvu Ngwakhe Wathemba Ingane. On today's video, we'll be carrying on our 4-part series discussing the elemental forces of creation. On today's video, we'll focus specifically around the elemental force, which is fire. Go into these rituals of connection and using the elemental forces of creation. We use them in order to be able to connect to the divine being creator, God, the goddesses, the primordial source, the divine being the mythical creatures and beings that exist in this dimension and in the other dimension, such as Tinzunza and Tinkanyamba. The divine then also being ourselves, as we are spiritual beings having a human experience. The divine also then being our ancestors who have lived in this human form and have transcended back into spirit and act as the bridge which connects us between this world and the fourth dimension. When we start then to go into today's element, which is the fire, what do we think of when we think of fire? What is the first thing that we need to awaken to, which is a unquantifiable, irrefutable truth around the fire? The fire is the center of our universe as human beings. As the world rotates around what is to us the biggest fire, which is the sun. So in orbiting and rotating around the sun then sends off rays. Those rays are charged with being able to be life-giving and to help in the creation, the growing and the production process of the living entities in this world. The fire is also then, the sun is also then charged with then having the ability also to be able to then change and alter the seasons as the world then orbits. The sun is a creational force. It's a life-giving force that we have in this world that our earth rotates around. So when we first start to connect with the sun and around our rituals of connection, it means that when we look at systems such as in yoga, where you have flows, where you do sun salutations, it's in order to acknowledge the divinity and the life-giving power that the sun represents. When we in our ancestral African wisdom systems always speak around waking up and meeting the sun as first light, it is acknowledging the importance of the sun in terms of facilitating any sort of life processes in this earth. Carrying on to understand then the fire when it comes to us here as a tool of use. As human beings, before we had learned to be able to master fire, our social behaviors and our abilities also in this world were very, very limited. We lived no different to the way animals are driven and dictated to by daylight, and also then vulnerable and susceptible to the natural elements being the weather. When we as humans then shifted from that point to being able to start our own fires, it signified an awakening, a certain enlightenment, a shift in our consciousness, where we went from the dark ages to now moving towards what is now recognized as the modern man. So when we think of fire and we connect also with fire, in its collective memory, it connects us back to those very first ancestors that shifted us away from the dark into the light. So when we call upon the fire, we are calling upon that memory, we're calling upon that consciousness, and we're calling upon that truth, which is the power that it represents. When our ancestors then carried on in antiquity in working with the fire energy, they then not only used fire to cook, to be able to forge certain tools for hunting, but they also use the fire to be able to change and build the environment around them. So fire within itself has an engineering sort of ability. It has an ability to forge. So we understand that in its creational processes, fire has the ability to create, to bring life, to bring things which are new. Fire also then has the ability to destroy. It is a destructive energy. This we are taught by in winter, when the trees wither and the logs go dry. When it's almost the end of winter, the fires start. Fires can ravage open savannas and large mountains and leave them black and ashened. But in that process of all of that dead wood and dead weight and all of the things which then have been consumed by the fire, that start, what then happens is when the first rains fall, they then are able to use that ash to fertilize the soil, and then life can bud and grow in abundance. So when we speak about the destructive power of fire, it's around understanding that it's not about good or evil or right or wrong, being a moral judgment or a value judgment, but it's around acknowledging that fire has an ability to consume all that is in its path and to hear all things that are in its path. So when we tap in once again into using the fire energy, simple practical things such as doing rituals of release using the fire, where you would write a letter stating all of the things which you feel are blockages and do not align with where you are at that time. And then as you sit in the fire, carrying on and setting that intention and combining it with the alchemy of actually burning the letter in a fire or over a candle, that is a way in which you can use the fire's creational and destructive energies to serve your soul purpose. Carrying on to understand this elemental force, which is fire. Fire also is something that has the ability to transform. It's a very transformative energy. We understand that when gold is first mined, it doesn't come in the form where we see it, where it's beautiful and polished. It needs to go through a certain smelting process. And for gold to smelt, it needs to be at a certain temperature. So only once it reaches that temperature is it then able to then smelt and then be used and forged into whatever it needs to be forged into. So it means that when we call upon the fire, we can also call upon the ability of fire to transform things, the ability of fire to bring a certain temperature into our things to where it will get to the point where it can transform or it can be transmuted and changed in its shape. So fire in itself, in the way that it burns and it moves, is a shapeshifter. That is another energy that we can call upon when we're working with the fire. So you say you're sitting at home and you're thinking, how can I, in a simple way, call upon this understanding of the fire? Perhaps maybe I'm not into lighting candles, I'm not into starting fires, but even us within our bodies, when we speak about somebody being hot-headed, even that is a fire energy. Often people that are hot-headed have a high temperament, which is a temperature. So working in a space of meditation where you work with yourself and you work on tempering and working with your emotions, you can do that through simple exercises such as breathing exercises, sitting and focusing as to when I start to get emotionally worked up and my temperament starts to change, what is it that I notice within myself, and then try and be able to then work and modulate and with those energies and those principalities that may exist within you. This is an introductory series, as I've said before, into how we can use the elemental forces to be able to connect to the divine, to be able to then start to have simple rituals which are accessible to us, which can help to ground us and align us with our soul purpose and our soul intention. And fire representing also the feeling of passion, is something that is very important in how even just taking a nice warm bath, sitting in there and feeling that relaxation, that sense of release and relaxation, because there is something that is also so beautifully inviting. Even when you sit and you think about a beautiful hot summer's day immediately in your mind you think about people being happy, dancing, maybe having some sundowners somewhere. So that understanding, that collectiveness of what fire represents, on a practical level we can use fire to forge things. On an emotive level we can use fire to connect and to work and modulate with our temperament. And we can also use fire to be able to also transform certain things which we feel no longer have a place in our lives. Please tune in for the last video, which will be part 4, where we'll be discussing the earth, and we'll be rounding off our introduction into the elemental forces of creation. Ngiyakubongela mina ngingogo Khanyakude mabuza shabalala lophanako lowakwadlabeta muntu ngekwakhe wathemba ingane. Please don't forget to like, comment, and give us your feedback, but also to subscribe and switch on the subscription bell so that you can know when a new video is dropped.